Being here today, Karl.
Thank you, Turner, for having me.
Well, thank you. Really quickly to those who are watching on Facebook, if you have questions for Chief Lieb as we move forward, please feel free to leave them in the comment section, and I will get to as many as we can. To get us started, why don't you give us just a little bit of background about yourself and kind of how you came to be in the position that you're in?
Will do, Turner. So I'm not a native Utahn. I'm a Midwesterner, but I've been here for 25 years. I came out here initially to ski and fell in love with the mountains, fell in love with the city, the climate. It's just beautiful. So I thought it'd be a great change. I moved out here, and ever since I've been working for the fire department. I went to school here at the University of Utah to gain my master's degree in public administration. I'm a former Air Force officer. I used to be a police officer before I was a firefighter for a short period of time, so I had some insight into that line of work as well. And I'm just so happy to be a Salt Lake City career firefighter and to have moved up from within. I feel really good about that.
Thank you. So this question will probably seem a little basic and a little silly, but what does the Salt Lake City Fire Department do?
Well, I tell you what, Turner, it's not that silly because we don't just put out fires. But of course we do that. We go to not only house fires, but we go to wildfires, we go to hazardous material incidents throughout the city. But what we do most of is medical response. And that's everything from chest pain to a traffic accident to a diabetic issue. We go on a lot of respiratory calls. We go on calls where people think someone might be hurt. They might be down on the ground throughout the city. We will go assess them. So, we do endless things, and it's a surprise every day, which is part of the positive things about this job, is that we never know what we're going to do on any given day. We're just happy to help.
Well, thank you. I think it's important for folks to understand kind of the structure of the city. So does the fire department, do you fit directly underneath the city? Are you kind of your own separate entity? How do you interact with the city and other departments within the city?
We are a city department it's funded through the general fund, and we fall under the mayor's office, just like many of the other city departments do. So I work closely with the mayor and her executive staff. I work closely with other city departments, from the police department to public utilities department to finance department to public relations, community relations, economic development, public utilities, the water department. So we have a very close relationship with them. So we're webbed into the infrastructure of the whole city, and we have to maintain good, positive, productive communications with a variety of entities every day. So my job is to be a liaison between the firefighters and their emergency response and everything that they need. And then, of course, the mayor's priorities and the city council's priorities, from the city's growth to the city's environment to our communities and how best to serve them.
Thank you. So you mentioned this a little bit, but what does your day-to-day job look like as the fire chief?
Well, my day-to-day job is just to ensure that the firefighters have the training, they have the equipment, they have the resources, they have the personnel to effectively and safely do their job. That's my number one priority. And of course, I want them all to go home at the end of the day. We all accept these positions as firefighters knowing that they're dangerous, that there's sometimes we will put our lives on the line to save lives. And there's a lot of versatility, there's a lot of innovation, there's a lot of creativity involved in the fire service and what we do. So,
oh, you're muted.
Sorry, that's part of what a lot of the firefighters like, is just the ability to be creative, the ability to adapt, the ability to innovate. But my job is anything from a meeting regarding city council emphasis or priorities, or the mayor's objectives throughout the fiscal year. I might have finance meetings. There's a lot of financial responsibility, obviously, with the chief's job. I talk to my organized labor group that represents all the firefighters. We have a good relationship with them. So if they have concerns about the working conditions or compensation or benefits, things like that, I help work through that. And I link them up with Salt Lake City and city entities that can solve those problems.
Well, thank you. You've mentioned a couple of times the council's priorities and the mayor's priorities, and just wondering if you would share what some of those priorities are that you're working on.
Well, I mentioned a couple of the mayor's priorities for this year, and they have been in the past as well. But COVID was a rough year in 2020, but a lot of the mayor's priorities revolve around our growth as a city and the environment, of course, clean air, efficiency, and then our communities. You know, what are we doing for the communities? How do we deliver our product and provide the best value to our neighborhoods? And that is in line with the city council's priorities, quite honestly. They want to know that they're going to get competent response, they want fast response, and they want efficient response as well. And they want it equally throughout Salt Lake City, of course. They want to have the same service on the west side of the city as we receive on the east side of the city, and the same values, same commitment, and that goes without saying. So that's what we try and deliver.
Thank you. Moving on to my next question, what would be your most important takeaway for folks to take away about the fire department?
Well, I think what I want people to know about their fire department in Salt Lake City is that they are an exceptional group. And I don't just say that anecdotally. We are a Class 1 fire organization. And that is given to us by an independent entity called the Insurance Service Office that evaluates everything in regards to community risk. So they're an entity that comes in and they stay for weeks evaluating our personnel, our training records, the way we staff, our equipment. They look at our dispatch center and how we respond, what are our response times. They look at the water supply, so they speak with public utilities about our availability of water throughout the city. All these things combined, and they give us a rating. And they evaluate thousands of fire departments throughout the city, and we have the highest rating and the only Class 1 rating in the state of Utah. And we're very proud of that in Salt Lake City. Among other things we're very proud of, you know, when you call the fire department, you call 911 and you're having a medical issue, or you're having a hazardous material concern or an incident, something spilled, or it's a fire, of course. I want everybody to know that the fire department is going to come, and we're going to come now. We are fortunate that we have staffed fire stations, 14 of them throughout Salt Lake City. And if one of them is busy on one emergency, I will tell you that there's going to be another unit coming from a nearby neighborhood to cover that call. And they're going to be there to try and assist you. And third, I think it's important for everybody to know, and I think I alluded to it before, is that the fire department is much more than just fire suppression and fire response. Most of the time, as I said, we're dealing with people one-on-one with health issues. So it's a very personal contact that we have with our customers and with the residents and business owners and travelers in and out of Salt Lake. We're right there. We're speaking with them. They're telling us about their concerns. What's the health problem that they're having, and we have to talk with them right there on scene. And COVID added, you know, a real variable involving that and a challenge for us. But we resolved that, and we still come and we still do those assessments. But that's the kind of work that I want all potential and future firefighters to understand, and our residents, that the majority of this job are medical responses.
Well, thank you. I think that's helpful for folks to understand. You mentioned that there are 14 fire stations. Is that correct?
14 fire stations, including one right in the middle of Salt Lake International Airport.
That was going to be my next follow-up question, is what responsibility does the department have for the airport?
We provide the firefighters that are on Salt Lake City International Airport. So we work with the airport to provide the equipment and the facilities that are on the airport and on the general aviation side of the airport, just Station 11, which responds to both Rose Park area on the east side of the general aviation district of the airport and on the airport itself, in addition to a dedicated airport Station 12, which is right in the middle of the airport.
Thank you. How many staff does the fire department have citywide?
We have 356 employees. The vast majority of them are sworn firefighters, but I have a significant support group as well, employees that are both sworn and civilian that make sure that the stations are prepared, they have the equipment, they have the facilities, they have all the things that they're going to need. So when you call 911, or if someone anywhere across the city calls 911, that we're ready to respond and handle that emergency.
Thank you. I'm going to move us on just a little bit, but wondering what types of projects or priorities the department is working on right now. I know that's a pretty broad question, but wanted to give you a chance to talk about any specific projects that you're working on.
Yeah, well, the fire department we always have a lot going on. I mean, we're at the center of a lot of things that are going on in Salt Lake. And not everybody realizes that because we kind of are low profile. We like to believe that we're reliable. People know that we're going to show up. They trust us to be there. So we have any number of things at any given time, Turner. Specifically right now, we are transitioning to ultimately have the responsibility for emergency management throughout Salt Lake City. Previously, that had been a separate entity within Salt Lake. And we are currently in the transition of undertaking that responsibility within the fire department. We think we're ideally suited to take that role. Obviously, we are very good at mitigating incidents. We're very good at public education, and we're going to become very good at recovery and the things that are necessary for the city to get past a windstorm or an earthquake or flood, things like that. So we're in the middle of that. We're constantly trying to diversify our workforce. That has been a priority for a number of years, particularly since I have led the fire department. I'm in my 5th year now, but I want my workforce to better represent the communities we serve. So we are actively recruiting firefighters, people of color, females. We're trying to educate people about the job, and this kind of interaction really helps us do that. I want people to understand what it's about, that it's not just about fighting fires and running into burning buildings. So that helps us. That's another one of our priorities. We're always trying to become more efficient, both in the way we respond and when we consider the environment. We have fire stations that are net zero and LEED Gold, which essentially what that means is they're very energy efficient. They don't leave a large carbon footprint. And in most cases, they produce as much energy as they consume. So we're very proud of that. We have a community healthcare program where we're trying to send firefighters out to assist those people that call us pretty regularly. And maybe we are not the type of service that they really need or that they're really after. So we try and connect them with the services that are most appropriate for the needs that they have, and get them taken care of so that they don't have to resolve to calling 911 and just receiving a fire crew that gets there and evaluates their situation, and ultimately they need more than what we can provide. So we have community healthcare paramedic program that does that. We're trying to make that more robust and more engaging for the community. And then also we try and facilitate growth in the city, specifically businesses. We want people to be able to build and evolve within the city and create new entities, new businesses, new opportunities for people throughout Salt Lake. And we are responsible for the fire code, of course. So most of these businesses and most of these buildings have to go through a process where they meet fire code, international fire code stipulations. And we try and resolve all those to the best of our abilities so that we can prioritize public safety, but also help the city develop and grow.
Well, thank you. It sounds like you have a lot on your plate. I want to circle back just a little bit. You mentioned diversifying your workforce. And for those that are watching that might be interested in a career as a firefighter, what is the kind of process of becoming a firefighter? Is there schooling or training required, or do they apply to the department and then receive all of that through the department?
Well, Salt Lake City is unique in that aspect, Turner, in that we do not require medical certificates or fire certificates, any of that to become a firefighter, which is not the norm across the country or quite honestly in Utah. So we provide all of that training, and it starts out with a written test. That's just a general kind of general knowledge kind of test. It talks about maps. It talks about reading. Talks about how you can identify, engineering, gears, things like that, and just get an idea of whether the person's personality characteristics would work as a firefighter. So it's an independently studied test that does not provide any disparate treatment to any particular group. So we feel pretty confident about what it does. We provide that test every 2 years. So every even year in the spring, we do this test. We traditionally have anywhere from 500 to 750 applicants, which we are very proud of. This is one of these industries that still has more than enough applicants than the actual jobs that we have available. But you take that test. If you do well on that test, you can expect to have a panel interview with firefighters, and they rate your capacity, to communicate, and your empathy, and your feeling about teamwork, and those sort of things that we really prioritize in the fire service. And then we create a list that's ranked, and ultimately I interview people off of that list prior to offering them employment. But as I said, you don't need to be large in stature. You do not have multiple degrees of any sort. We are looking for people who care about people and can communicate with them one-on-one and can work as a team, as I said, and to think about others rather than just prioritizing themselves. So those are the kind of individuals that we're looking for, and we can find those individuals throughout Salt Lake City.
Well, thank you. And where would we send folks if they're interested in pursuing a career with the fire department?
slcfire.com, and then there's a career tab on there. It's really a large square. Just click on that, and that'll give you all the information to get started and to link yourselves with the Salt Lake City Fire Department, and we'll stay in communication with you.
Well, thank you. I'm going to move us on just a little bit. I really appreciate all that information on careers with the fire department. My next question is related to projects and priorities on the west side, but I feel like you already gave us a really comprehensive view of what the department's working on. As a little bit of a follow-up, with the development of the inland port and kind of the whole northwest quadrant, including the new prison site, is that something that the department will have a role in, is providing fire protection to that whole area of the northwest quadrant?
Yeah, I certainly hope so, Turner. I mean, we are ideally suited to provide that service to the northwest quadrant development. The details of public safety and who's going to respond to that area haven't been created yet or addressed. But I think given the quality of the response that we've demonstrated here in Salt Lake throughout the city, for so many years, I think we're ideally suited to give the community that in the northwest quadrant. I hope that we are part of that conversation. I would certainly like to be the ones that provide it.
Thank you. My next question is, this is a little bit of a bigger ticket question, but could you just kind of describe your philosophy or general approach to being the fire chief?
Interesting question. Well, you know what? I believe that if you provide your employees the tools necessary to do a good job and allow them to do it, I think things get done and they get done well. So I try not to complicate things too much. I'm here to assist my employees, firefighters and civilians included, with whatever they need. But I trust them because I've trained them and I've made a commitment to them and we've invested in them. And I think that if you invest in those employees, I think they want to give that return on investment. So I allow them to do the job that they're trained to do and they're prepared to do and they're equipped to do. And I try not to get involved in other people's responsibilities unless it becomes apparent that I need to. And that's worked out well for these last few years. I feel the fire department's really in a great place right now. And we have an excellent reputation. And I think our community feels a really strong bond of trust with our people and our crews. And we're intertwined into the community and we feel good about that.
Well, thank you. I'm going to give you just a short break really quick because I've asked you a bunch of questions in pretty quick succession. And just remind folks that are watching live, I'm running toward the end of my pre-prepared questions. So if you have questions, I've seen a couple come in. If you've been sitting on a question or you have additional ones, please feel free to put them in the chat and we'll get to as many as we can. Moving on to my kind of last question for you. Can you just share a story of success or something inspiring that's happened in your time as fire chief?
Oh, well, I don't know as much as fire chief, Turner, as just being a firefighter and knowing what kind of things that we do on a daily basis. I mean, it's very rewarding to be a firefighter, and the people that are fortunate enough to provide this service to the residents of Salt Lake City love this job. We rarely have individuals that leave outside of retirement. We don't have a high turnover, but getting back to your question, I think some of the things that firefighters look back on the most, and there are usually multiple examples of this, is giving someone a second chance. And I'm talking literally a second chance at life. Whether that's in a car accident, serious car accident, where we might need to have to use the extrication tools to free someone, whether it's in a cardiac arrest patient, where we're able to stabilize that patient, get them to an emergency department, and have them recover. Or maybe it's part of the opioid crisis, where we arrive on scene. Maybe it's a heroin overdose. We're able to reverse those effects of that particular drug and give someone another chance. And ultimately, they end up in treatment, and they would come back and they seek you out, or they seek that particular fire crew out, and they say, thank you for that. I mean, those kind of things are priceless, and they mean so much to the firefighters. And we don't expect that kind of thing to happen. We don't expect the thank yous, but when we receive them, they're noteworthy, and you never forget them.
Thank you. I think that's a really, really good segue to one of our first audience questions. Ellis submitted a question and asked what kinds of things the department does to support the mental health of firefighters, because you are dealing with some very heavy issues, and just wondering what types of support is available for your firefighters.
Good question, Alice. Yeah, the city and the fire department specifically has a very robust program for mental health. We have people that we can talk to immediately. We have crisis intervention teams for those crews that are out on some very difficult scenes, because we see, hear, and do things that most ordinary employees of Salt Lake City do not see. And it's very robust. We also have a peer support program that's private within the department, where people can just call up a peer. They have been trained to talk people through periods of isolation or suicidal thoughts or any sort of addiction, even as far as money problems or marital issues or things like that. And that all remains private. So I, as a fire chief, am not provided that information, obviously. So people can feel free to contact our peer support program anytime. So we feel good about that. We recognize the stress that firefighters carry around. It's one of those professions that ultimately can have an impact on so many parts of people's lives outside of work. And we want them to know that they have something or someone to talk to, or an entity that cares. And we put the resources behind it to make a difference. Thank you.
Shifting gears a little bit, and I should say we're in a little bit of a grab bag period with questions, but Charlotte has submitted a question just asking about the hazmat response. You mentioned this earlier, and just wondering how large of a role hazmat response is for the fire department, and then if there are particular hotspots where hazmat type accidents happen more regularly in the city.
Interesting, Charlotte. So hazmat is a significant role for the fire department. We have pretty routine, well, nothing's routine, but we have pretty regular hazmat incidents across Salt Lake City. We don't have any considerable hotspots, but generally speaking, we locate our hazmat teams, and we have two of them in Salt Lake City, one on the east side up by the university, and one on the west side way out by Bangerter and California Avenue. both industrial areas. And those are the kind of areas where we see most of our hazardous materials responses. I was a former hazardous materials tech, so I know the type of calls that our people go on. We have a lot of spills and leaks throughout the industrial areas. We have a lot of those just at gas stations as well. We have air monitoring throughout Salt Lake City. Sometimes we don't know there might be a strange smell. Those kind of things would go on quite often. So we're readily available to respond to those kind of calls, and we are equipped and trained to deal with them. And that is a pretty common call for Salt Lake City.
Thank you. Kind of on a similar note, a few months ago, there was a fire on a railroad bridge on the west side. And without diving too deep into that topic, I'm just wondering if you could kind of talk about what happened and what the response to an incident like that looks like.
The railroad bridge on the west side, yeah, just off of North Temple. So when we respond to a scene like that, we obviously send more than enough firefighters to those kind of response until we identify what we're dealing with. In this case, it was a bridge, a trestle bridge, heavy timber, just covered in creosote, that oily substance that's designed just to preserve the wood. Unfortunately, when it's superheated, it doesn't go out. The fire is continually burning and smoldering within those pieces of wood, and the water just does not reach it. So essentially, in order to put a fire like that out, you need heavy machinery, you need to topple that bridge, just destroy it, put it in a pile, and just suffocate it. That's really the only way to get a fire like that out. It's not uncommon. We see fires like that in some landfills where they're superheated. They're under a narrow layer of soil. And the only way to put that fire out, it's going to continue to smoke, it's going to continue to smolder, is to get some heavy machinery in there, turn that product over, and then suffocate it, either with water, more sand, or foam. We may use foam for that. So in the bridge case, it took an extensive period of time to actually get the owner of that bridge to come in and destroy that property, because it is their property and it's their responsibility to do so. We'll maintain our presence on scene, make sure that fire does not expand. There's no hazard that gets out of that isolated area, and we're doing our best to just control that scene until the owner takes responsibility for it. And then we stay in the loop all the way through, even when other federal entities, as far as air monitoring in this instance, or county health department and state health department are on scene and using their expertise to determine any further hazards.
Thank you. The next question that has been on the front of my mind is there was an article in KSL about just an increase in fires in abandoned buildings, and there were, I believe, 3 over the weekend at the Fleet Block. I'm just wondering what type of work the fire department does to prevent fires, and then whether there's been an increase in fires in abandoned buildings and places like that.
Yeah, Turner. Well, on the prevention side, we do our best to ensure that people don't gain entrance to these buildings, because they are hazardous. There's a reason often that the buildings are vacant. Structurally, they're compromised. There's usually no electricity. There's no heat. Nothing of that sort within those buildings. So I would like to see those buildings secured. We don't do that security for those buildings, but obviously we are the ones who respond if ultimately the building is ignited. And oftentimes that ignition is warming fires, and it's from those experiencing homelessness, or those that are just looking for a place, to shelter for the evening, and ultimately hazards occur, and human-made causes is often the case. So we respond. Have we seen those increase? I would say anecdotally, we have seen those increase. I don't have those specific numbers in front of me, but it seems obviously when the weather is colder, we're going to see more instances of those type of fires, and then we'll continue to respond. And part of our responsibility is to get inside those buildings and ensure there's no people inside those buildings. And that's a risk just to get inside and do those things depending on the development of the fire. So that puts firefighters at risk. So we want to reduce, honestly, we want to eliminate those type of fires so that we don't see people hurt in these buildings. I do not want to see members of the public inside there or anyone experiencing difficulties or challenges out there for shelter. I don't want to see them in this building at the bottom of one of these buildings. And I obviously don't want to see a firefighter hurt trying to mitigate these scenes either.
Thank you. We've run out of audience questions, and so I'm just going to make a prompt really quickly. If you're watching live and you have any final questions, we've run to the end of our prepared ones and the end of audience questions. I do have the kind of final prepared question I have for you is there a question I should have asked you today that I didn't ask you today?
I don't think so, Turner. I think the one thing I would like to add to everybody, if since you didn't ask specifically, is if you're interested in this job, and quite honestly, you should be, because it's a great job. It's very rewarding, and it's very satisfying, and it's very interesting. And it's different than most any job that I've ever been a part of or ever known about. But if you're interested, I think you should look us up. And if you don't have access to a computer, I think you should contact the fire department directly, 799-4101, and you'll get my administrative assistant who will link you up with some other people that give you some information. But we're happy to educate you about what we do and how we do it. And I just want everybody to know that they can do it. You absolutely can do it, whether you're large in stature, whether you're small in stature, whether you're a woman, whether you're a man. We will teach you the techniques and the skills that you need, as long as you can smile and you're good with people and you feel good about responding to situations that can become a little hectic and just a little bit scary in some aspects. If you're up for that, I'm interested in you being interested in being a firefighter. So don't count yourself out.
Thank you. And we just did have one final audience question come in. And it was from Anne, and I'm going to just let her know I'm paraphrasing a little bit. It was a longer comment, but she asked, as we look toward the summer and fireworks, I know that those restrictions probably aren't in place yet, but what can people do to be more responsible in their use of fireworks?
Well, obviously observe the no fireworks zones. Okay, when we are surrounded by urban interface on 3 sides of Salt Lake City. That means where the wild meets the developed areas, essentially. And we are very cautious about those areas, and we're pretty conservative about where those zones are that you are not able to ignite fireworks. And that's for a reason. People get hurt, buildings will be burned, property will be lost, and it's not a good thing just to light off a firework to have that kind of result. So, you know, the firefighters enjoy safe use of fireworks as much as anybody. But when fireworks season comes around, I will tell you that we are on a heightened sense of awareness. And we are very busy, which is unfortunate. If people would just enjoy those fireworks legally and safely.
Well, thank you. And just a little bit of a follow-up question on that. What kind of resource issues does it create when you have during fireworks season and when the weather is hot? Well, obviously, when we have people out that are addressing a small grass fire, when we have crews that are out addressing a small grass fire, Turner, and then we have a different emergency come in that same neighborhood. Maybe that's a diabetic problem, or someone is seriously hurt in a traffic accident. That's going to cause a minor delay in response. So the more crews that I have out on grass fires or illegally ignited fireworks, the less that we're going to have available right then and right now for other emergencies. Okay, so it's a domino effect. So if we can reduce the amount of calls that we go on for inappropriate use of fireworks or illegal use of fireworks, or fireworks in an area that there shouldn't be fireworks, or of course, if we have a large wildfire and now we're dedicating multiple resources to that, that has an impact on responses throughout the city. And of course, if necessary, we have mutual aid partners that will bring fire units into Salt Lake, but we just as well keep our own fire units ready for those emergencies where we really make a difference. Well, thank you. And I just want to express my sincere gratitude for your time today. Thank you for coming on and for talking about the great work you're doing. I'll make sure that I link to your careers page on Facebook and with the recording. But any final thoughts?
I don't think so, Turner. Thanks for having me. I really appreciated talking to you and talking to some of our Salt Lake City residents. Thank you.
Thank you. And you take care. We appreciate you coming on today.
Have a good afternoon.
All right. Take care.